some points. Let's see. Well, here's the agenda. This is the night of it. I do have backup, but yeah, that's what I have. Okay. Nice.
Second little meeting for June. We're a little cozy today. And before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Helen Wheeler. I'm on the board with Phil. And thank you. I know Phil thanks you all the time for being in this meeting. But thank you for spending your time and bringing Tyler over from this meeting. It's very helpful.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. Yeah. Let me just pass out the agendas because Sarah organized it a little bit. I think my name is a bit. Oh, sorry. Let's hold that one. Yeah. Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is something we don't have.
No, that you do, but it's organized. I think it's hard to find. So. Oh, is it actually somewhere?
This thing here, yeah.
Yes. It's on the back, the
This all the
far
way.
back.
There you go. So if we couldn't find ours, we could use this.
Yeah.
Or is this also the one for the public?
Yes.
Should we put it over there? Everybody find it? Anybody need the agenda?
I'll take one.
All right.
Oh, Jim,
I'll show you
did
where
you grab
yours is.
your, do you have, okay.
Oh, we got one.
He's, I don't think is in, I think he's the only one that's here for exams.
That's not my ego, it's my back.
I don't know if those will help you very much, but.
Well.
You're not gonna be in the video.
Better than most.
You don't want to sit in one of the chairs?
It's-
Oh, we trying to
it's-
use your
That's
laptop?
why I feel it's a little disjointed, I'll walk you through where this stuff is, but.
Yeah, but for this is for this today. That's okay, I got it.
It's a firewall. That's right. Oh, wait, that's straight, right?
Oh.
Now I am. Did you guys, did the sign-in sheet go all the way around?
No, also what?
Okay. Oh, sorry. Let's see what it is. No, Jeremy's here.
I know we didn't get to sign it yet.
Oh.
He happens.
We're in the same pew. Yeah. And
Yes.
I don't think he's.
So let's begin. Let's call the meeting to order at 6:35. Today's speech is a roll call.
We just go around the room, name ourselves, right?
Right.
Marcella Green, Phil Palmer.
Dan Doctor.
Grateful with an audit.
Fiona Walton. Therese McNamee. Chrissy Opitz.
So everyone's here except Peter, here and Judd. Approval of agenda. Let's take a moment to look at the agenda. The minutes are in the back.
Yeah.
It's the next thing.
They're right behind this.
Items for future. All right. Anybody move to approve the agenda? Dana moves, or Juan moves and Dana seconds. All in favor to approve the agenda? Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Before we get into the rest of the agenda, is there anyone who'd like to make a community comment? Would you like to make one? Okay. Okay, nobody else is present from the public. Item 2, review and discuss project list.
Yep.
Correct, I guess you wanna take it over.
Yes, I would like to do this, and
Project
it is
list.
on the first tab there. It's divided up into sections, so, I'm just getting familiar with it, but it's in the first
does it say at the top?
It, says, oh.
Mine says,
Yeah.
I don't think I have the right sheet
This
of
is
paper.
the auditor recommendations.
Right.
Sorry, go to the next tab. Yeah, it should say, measure the.
Priority.
Yes.
Okay, so everyone's got it, it's on the left-hand
This is
sheet.
all the stuff your email too.
It was, that's right. I just didn't know, I didn't know where it was.
Yeah.
Where these are filed.
Sounds familiar from,
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So what I wanna do is kind of tell you what we've been leading up to and how that affects this group. Is that, as you know, that we've been, in January, we had selected the architects and we had already selected the program manager, and they did some very in-depth, public feedback on our major priorities, et cetera, and that got approved in March. And with that, we will go through the project list and we'll talk about how that impacts, but I wanna just talk a little bit about where they're at today. Is that from that point in time, they're doing more, in the schematic design. So they're actually been meeting with the site principals, with various groups that are involved at the site. They're also trying to coordinate with, some community members, et cetera. Depends on what the projects are. For example, on, at Crittenden, one of the big projects is the track, and they have been looking at how that might be able to fit onto the site, cause it's a large track, so it takes up a lot of, real estate. And then they're just trying to get the conversations with the city set up, because we do have joint uses with the city on the track. So a lot of those kinds of conversations are happening, and then they've, for example, have been meeting, on the locker rooms are another project that they're here. And so they're meeting with the PE teachers to talk about exactly what the needs are and how the existing space is working, et cetera, in more depth, because they're actually coming back to the meetings with, here's some ideas of where it might lay out, or some conceptual ideas of how this might work. So they're, yes,
First question for you. Agreeing about the track itself, how is the city involved in that particular area?
For all of our fields, we have joint use with the city, so they're basically, we're partners on all the
So
fields.
you're-
We own the fields, but the city leases them out in the afternoons for various sports activities. They help maintain all of our fields, so we're very close partners on everything. We'll be coordinating with them because they would put up funds for it and help maintain it, so, yeah, we would be in partnership with them on that. Okay, so I don't wanna go into every detail, I just wanted to explain kind of what's going on, and our goal is to get through schematic design, which sort of the end product looks like, has a little bit of a map drawing, maybe not as detailed as this, but it'll sort of lay out, here's the key components that are gonna happen at the site, and then it'll have some design concepts of how those will actually look in a pictorial. So they might have done a 3D design so that you can see what a building might look like, or they might have some samples of how a theater might lay out, things like that. So that's what our objective is, over the summertime, is to come back for final approval. Here's our schematic design so that they can start doing the plans, the drawings, so that they can go out to bid and construction. So that's where we stand right now, and how does that relate back to this committee? As we talked about in the bylaws and, at prior meetings, the purpose of this committee is, as the oversight and the public voice, I guess, for lack of a better term, is to really make sure that the projects that are coming through really meet with the intention of the bond and explicitly with the bond language. So what I wanna do tonight is give you examples of how we've mapped out what, the project lists are going to be and how they might be called, and then we can go back and look at how that fits into the bond language and discuss ultimately, once we get through schematic design, at the very tail end of that, before they get deeper into the drawings, we will come back with a formal budget, final schedule, et cetera, so that you will have the exact line by line, this is what's going to happen with the cost budget associated with it. And that would really be your final document for reviewing and comparing, but if we're building up our, I guess, our knowledge base and our understanding of what's going on, so that when those final numbers come in, you guys have the backup. So that's what I want to do tonight. So with that, if we go to the list, starting on page 2, called the project summary. We did these project summaries where, we basically use the same terminology for both sites, so that we could have a common language and a common way of reviewing this at every site. And as we move forward, even at the other elementary sites, we will use the same language, even if they might not be doing the exact same projects. We'll try and follow the same type of language, so that it makes sense and you can see that it all fits together. So,
But
yes.
same language, do you mean when we show a cost estimate, show things across multiple schools as if they're all gonna get the same project?
No, not
Because
as
this one
if
has
they,
like,
no, not as if they will all get the same exact projects.
You mean the categories?
The categories.
Yes.
Technology, data.
Just
Yes.
about, she's
oh, okay.
just talking
So-
about these whole categories.
I just wanted to find out, because it does extend from the same language there to, when I first saw the project cost listed, you know, it had like,
There will be
It's the same-
there will be, as the lists go from from the middle schools to the elementary schools, the big buckets, there will be additional big buckets, because the auditoriums are not going to be at the elementary school sites. But for example, at the elementary school sites, we're talking about the shade structures, things like that, that might be a category that fits all of the elementary schools. But we're trying to have a master list that's not 100 different categories, and then under those big projects, there will be details of exactly what's happening.
okay.
Yeah, you will have some detailed breakdown on exactly what project, because as you move forward, the way that the information comes out to you is, for example, let's use auditorium as an example. The auditorium will stand alone as its own project at the middle school, and as we move forward, there will be a lot of different categories that go under the auditorium. We have to get an acoustician, we have to the contractor, the inspectors, etc. All of that will show up under auditorium, and it'll be broken down by line, but this all gets rolled up so that at the top level, you can look at all the elementary schools together and see that there's some commonality between them. But the detail does get broken down so that you can kind of go up or down the level that you need to. And the audits especially, they go for every invoice and check, does this meet it, et cetera.
So may I ask a couple of questions?
Yes.
Because I'm trying to locate myself, and I think you already addressed this, so I'll apologize if
Okay.
it's repetitive, but is the point of going through this now so that we're sort of getting a preview of what's going to happen, so that when we look at line items and make sure that you're in compliance with the measure, that it's not coming out of left field? You're
We're
contextualizing this.
building our language, we're building our ability to analyze these things, because this is, these are going to be some commonalities across different sites. And at the end of June, the auditors will come in. There hasn't been a lot of activity, but they'll start for what's happened up till June and start analyzing those line by line and come back to us with an audit that we're trying to set the same language for everything that we're doing.
And the intention is that we sort of have to analyze it, we're analyzing the same categories.
Yes. He
Yes.
wants to know, he doesn't wanna just have one bucket that says auditorium for X amount of money and not be able to see the line items below that, because, you know, maybe we're sneaking some, not that we have, but don't put that in the notes, but maybe something's under there that doesn't really belong, and if we don't show the details of it, you would have no way of knowing. I think that's what you are alluding to.
That's part of it. I
Okay.
just, like in the list of projects, it has, oh, by the way, I was pulling up the Measure G ballot language, which is on the very left-hand side if you want, like 10
The
sheets
first.
in.
And
The
actually,
first tab, the first tab.
the first tab, right,
Yeah, if you
behind
want, as
bylaws.
we're looking at like, okay, toilet rooms, or auditorium, mock classrooms, you could like, if you have time, and you're curious, you can try to match it up with the ballot language, because that's eventually gonna be our job, to find these over there, and if it's like, wait, you know, runway, I don't see that in here anywhere, then that's what we're gonna have to, doing our job, we'll be pointing that out, I think, right? So we're looking at the ballot language now, and kind of finding out,
That's, we're doing these
Similarity.
as an example, and the other thing that I'm presenting tonight is the auditors,
Mhm.
and their function is to help this committee make sure that we are in compliance with the bond documentation. So their job is to go through everything and come back with a report for this committee to see that all of these things are in compliance. So our initial roles here are kind of setting up our bylaws, setting up our language, getting to, because there's not a lot of information coming in yet. And then once the information starts coming in, you're looking at a statement of activities, what's happened over the last period of time, how does that fit in, and you're reviewing the audit reports. And the audit reports will talk about compliance and can also talk about where can things improve. That's the discussions that happen in this committee
compliance with the ballot language.
with the ballot language.
Not compliance with like financial controls or that sort of stuff. Not that kind of-
They do look at internal controls on the bond expenditures, because it's not just,
But we don't. It's not
no,
all.
they
Not our
come
job.
from
Those
our
auditors,
job.
I just thought auditors just did that stuff, like
No, they do.
the accounts match up, you know,
They
there's no money
do.
missing.
No, the bond audit is broader or slightly different than a financial audit. They do look at the financial aspects of it, but they also are looking for compliance with the bond language, which is, does it meet what was outlined in terms of procurement? Are we meeting the codes as far as how you go about bidding and public bidding, et cetera? They're looking at all of those things to make sure that it's meeting these obligations, and this committee is using them, it's an outside third party, it's using them as doing the legwork so that you guys can say, is there a problem or not, because they're gonna tell you in their management letters if they think that there's some concerns, and or.
Let's also keep in mind that the auditors give opinions, and, you know, everybody has opinions, and so you don't have to agree with them.
Yeah.
They're gonna have their opinion. But most of the time, you're gonna find, you're gonna agree.
Mhm.
They're doing a good job.
Generally, what they're gonna tell us is, they're gonna tell us, they're looking if there's anything material that is a
Yeah.
problem, but generally, they're going to tell us, here's some places where you could consider, it might help you make some improvements over here. They're looking at ways to help you be more efficient, be more effective in how we're spending the money, et cetera. And that's the conversation that happens here. It's, okay, they're telling us these things could happen, what are you doing about it, district? Are you taking appropriate action based on these items? That's the role of this committee. But since we don't have all of this information queued up yet, we're spending time preparing ourselves because the reports will start coming in the late, I'd say
So is it a
September.
special report from the auditors to this group, or
It's a
will-
special
so
report, it's
just
separate from our financial audit.
Separate from the financial audit, okay. And there will be, this group will see the entire audit findings unredacted,
Yep.
so.
The auditor will come in and present and have answer questions, et cetera, and present any concerns.
Next, short question. Still feeling a little bit confused. The project summary that we're looking
Uh-huh.
at, is this Caribbean, or is this both, or?
That's, so we use common language, so for right now, it's both of
It's both,
them
okay.
together. But as we move forward, there will be a detailed list. For example,
Sure.
it'll have the track that only will be on Crittenden. Okay.
So this line item, the 1,750,000, maybe that's for a track. So then Graham will have that million, the physical education requirements, $1,750,000. So then I guess when we see two different lists, that money will be in different buckets for Graham, presumably. Because they're not gonna build
Yes.
another track.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Or
I
it might,
mean,
or it might not be there, Graham might be short the 170.
Graham's, they
Because
have
they don't even
different
track.
priorities.
Yeah.
They have different priorities, so yes.
So who decides whether they're short of it or it's spent on something else?
The board does.
Board does.
We're bringing a final budget,
Recommendation.
budgeted recommendation with a detailed project list to the board after the end of
So
schematic
it's
design.
not our job to allocate the resources. to
Correct.
one
It
person.
is
That's
not.
true. We can be curious about it,
We could be curious.
but it's not
We're
gonna
gonna
be
tell
done.
them.
But the role is really about, is there a way to be more effective and efficient? And that's what part of the audit
Right,
does.
Yeah, the Graham
So,
already got theirs, people.
okay, so with that, so at this point, the project summary is outlining what types of items are going into each of those projects. And it is a combination for both Crittenden and Graham. However, there are some differences between the two sites. But I'm just gonna go through a couple of examples. For technology and data infrastructure, the priority conversations certainly raised this as a key issue. And there was talk all over of how far technology and data infrastructure could go. But what our main emphasis here is to provide the bandwidth, the infrastructure, because those are things that, the hard wires that run through all the sites, so that as we get, equipment, et cetera, it can run effectively, because without the hard wires put in when they're doing construction, any equipment we get does not really work as well as it could. So that's where we're putting our resources for technology from the bonds right now. That's what we're trying to emphasize. So they should end up with adequate wireless capacity and adequate internet capacity to run multiple machines throughout the site. Right now they have computer labs, but we've just been moving towards doing laptop carts or tablet carts, and we're finding that we don't have enough bandwidth to run all of those machines. We've been adding as we go, but we'd like to get them set up to take us to the next level. So that's an example of what fits in there. And then we talked a little bit about the auditorium as an example. That is something that I want to be clear, that is something that is, it is our priority to do at both sites. That's not something that we're gonna put at one site and reallocate the resources to another site. We are looking to have both middle schools have, similar size auditoriums and similar setup in them. And so they're in the process of planning that out right now, but our initial objective was to have fixed seating, probably for about 350 people in each of the auditorium. Exactly how that's gonna look, they're working on that right now.
What is the circulation and mechanical space, like what falls under that?
So,
That's a big portion of this.
yes, that's, it's
Backstage.
the backstage, and also, in the front to have a lobby and people get in to it, et cetera. So, but the stage, the biggest issue for us is that they don't have any place to keep their props, they don't have any place, the stage isn't big enough, et cetera, so they're gonna build all of that back in. And
Again,
have
this is
something.
true, you're saying they, you mean both schools.
Both sites will have similar auditoriums.
And both needs.
Both need them, and the only differences that we're really seeing in terms of two different architects and how working on it. We have, talked about hiring a common acoustician and theater consultant so that we can get them on the same page. We thought that would make it easier so that they would end up being similar to each other. So that's gonna happen. And then secondly, what we've told the architects is that while we want it fitting into the campus and have a look that fits into the campus, we want the functionalities to be the same at both sites. So that's our initial conversations, and they're looking to bring on a group that will help them meet that.
One more question about that. Is the auditorium supposed to function for both their musical groups and their theatrical groups
Yes.
for both places?
One more quick question itself. Is the art, and this really, I think, we need to keep it short because it's sort of outside our purview, but is the architect's experience in building auditoriums, I mean, we've got different things going on, right? We've got a track, we've got science labs,
Yeah.
and I'm just curious whether or not the architects will have to have specific experience building those specific things as opposed to
So
things in general.
we hired them, and that was one of our criteria, that they knew that, but we will hire somebody that specializes in that.
In auditorium design.
In
or-
an auditorium
or a STEM
design,
class
and it'll be
design.
one auditorium designer that pulls both of the campuses together. That's the way that we'll be able to have them be in par with each other. Okay, so, I'm happy to go through each one of these just because I think it lets people kind of have a quick overview of them. Modernizing the classrooms, this was the items probably that from multiple people got the most emphasis, but it's not maybe the big marquee kind of project. But making sure that inside the classrooms, they're fine with it just being the same size box, but they want the furniture, they want the whiteboards, they want some tack walls, and they wanna be able to move the things around in there as teaching strategies change, if they get more technology in there, if they're doing some projects, et cetera, they wanna be able to make sure that that classroom can do all of that. They wanted some improvements in the heating, and the air conditioning, et cetera. So all of those things are under this umbrella of modernizing classrooms.
Where did they go?
That talked about this, it was teachers, they interviewed students, and, we got feedback from the parents and the community about those kinds of items. Pedestrian safety and parking, this is certainly an issue at all of our sites. It's certainly a concern of parents and staff to make sure that it's as safe as possible. However, at Graham, they have a much more active and vocal group and a priority because of the street has been a lot busier, et cetera. So
3 accidents.
3 accidents have happened,
3 kids getting hit this fall, so,
and there just
yeah.
isn't a lot of, Crittenden has a lot of ways to access it, and Graham doesn't have so many points of entry, so everybody's kind of coming at one spot. So this has certainly been a priority project right now that people are really engaged in and moving that forward, and we also have been meeting with the city and the city is trying to bring resources to bear on the problem also. So these are examples of different projects have different priorities, but also how we have to partner with different people to move it forward. The outdoor improvements, this was an area that was pretty critical from the community's point of view. And some of the things that we talked about there was comments about, especially at Graham, it's a little sterile, or they'd like it to, it's a lot of concrete, I guess is what the phrases that were used. And so the conversations around that have been, can we use some of the outside space to expand the learning space? There certainly is talk about, outdoor learning and making, and people are even taking classrooms out there, but our real emphasis is that we wanna be able to make sure that if you are going outside because they're working on a project and the teacher can watch them right outside, do they have internet access, do they have some seating area? Cause they will send kids out in small groups to work on a special little project right outside the classroom, so we're trying to make some space that really will help that function. And can we make it kind of, make it less sterile looking than if we incorporate some of those by having some nice seating areas and some trees for shade or what have you. So those are some of the things that they're talking about, and maybe as you're coming in the entrances of the school, can we have them be, more aesthetic? Lighting, et cetera, those are all the things that are there. And an example would be for Crittenden, one of the areas is that theater area, the outdoor theater area in the middle of the campus, that's sort of a step up. It's not used very much because it gets a lot of sun, but they do eat lunch right next to there, and so talking about can we use it with even maybe a little bit more shade, because they do have a lot of kids flow out there during lunchtime, and they think that would really make the space more useful. So those are the kinds of things that they're looking at in this example. Reconfigure the library, that's a big conversation about what is the library gonna look like in the future, and how do we wanna use that space now and set it up so that it can be more flexible in the future. So they have brought in the librarians, they are gathering with the librarians at the city of Mountain View to talk about how they've set up the library there to generate ideas, because what the librarian's biggest concern was having enough storage, and having enough space for people to come in and do projects, and a lot of the teachers' concerns were they want the resources from the library inside the classroom. So how do we kind of find that balance between the two and have it be something that can last for a period of time? That's what happens in schematic design. We've said that the library is important, we wanna make sure that we're addressing it. This is the category that it fits into, but the details of that is what they're working on right now.
Question on that. So I adore our librarians, I love our librarians, but they're all just as old as we are. Are you talking, you know, I don't even think about so the ideas that you may be getting from our librarians, I'm thinking about state Mountain View librarians too, they're all the same age as we are. So are there recent library school grads or, I don't wanna
What
rock
sort of
here.
benchmarking are you doing, if you will, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, our benchmarking is with the folks that we already have
Right,
and
right.
the city of Mountain View. I don't know if there's a big modern, beautiful library somewhere, or, do you know what I mean?
I don't know the answer.
I don't know. I mean, if somebody sat me in a room and said, what would you envision in a library, you'd get, you know, a 40-plus-year-old person.
What they're really asking is, the way I would phrase it is, the library has traditionally been a place where kids come to get information and learn how to get information. And because so much information is contained here now, these are where all the resources are, it's not necessarily the space of the library, because it's a big box, and we're excited because that could be the place where, you know, if you're trying to have a couple of different groups come and learn together, this is a big, great space that we can use. So we think as far as keeping the four walls, we don't want to change that very much. It's what goes on inside those four walls, and how do they access information? Do we have computer labs in there? Do you set it up so that it's like a lounge? So they're talking about what are all the possibilities and how can they make that work within the spaces that are there.
I know what I want conference rooms, I want a comfortable place to sit and learn and read and with good lighting. And by the way, teleconferencing is pretty passe these days, nobody uses it.
Yeah, so I
In all of our
think,
corporate buildings, it's just gathering dust in the
Yeah.
corner.
You know, I think you want a comfortable place, but you also want, maybe the kids don't want it, but they should, buy it.
Yeah, sure.
And that is
Sure.
for me, when I was in school, especially in high school, right, the library was where I wanted to get everything done, where I really wanted to get something done.
Yeah.
And that, you know, to me, that's.
Study space, if you will.
And that's why,
Yeah.
you know, if it's too open,
that's why it's pretty interesting conversation, cause from a building perspective, you know, we're talking about for walls and furniture and things like that. That's what you can do in these spaces, and it might even change. We think it'll change within the next 5 to 10 years because technology is going so quickly, that the way people get information has changed so much. So from a facilities perspective, it's really how do you set the footprint so that it can change over time, and that you put enough into place so that they can make it flexible and move it around as they
Right.
need to. But facilitating the conversation right now about how to do that and get yourself set up to do that, that's what I think is kind of lends itself to thinking outside the box and getting people so that they can, that's what the architects really help facilitate is what are you trying to accomplish in this space, and how can they help them have a
Well, to
picture
on
of
this
what
point, I
it is.
think you're right on, is that we need to ask people outside of those that have been in that facility for 20, 30, 40 years.
Well, that's what the architect's role is that they are doing multiple sites all over the place and
Yeah.
seeing what everybody's doing
What's
in these
working.
sites, and they should be bringing those options to help meet the needs of our group.
It applies to every category.
Yeah, sure.
That's their
Right.
role, yeah,
Not
that's
just
their
the library
role,
one.
yeah. Okay, we talked a little bit about the trash, the kitchen upgrades, it's really, we have some, it does, I'll share a little bit, cause I think it's kind of piggybacks off the library conversation.
We gotta do a quick down.
Okay, then,
Wow.
okay, then all I'm gonna say is that we are interested, we have been moving to more, fresh produce and prepared food as opposed to packaged food, and so setting up the equipment in the kitchen so that we can do that better. That's what our goal is there. Security, a lot of the rest of these stuff, the one that I will really go through is the classroom additions and the STEM labs. The classroom additions, we do have a demographic study that's talking about the growth of, the school-age children in our area and how that's going to impact us. We are presenting that to the board on Thursday night, and we do see growth at both of the middle schools. And so part of the discussion is how are we using the existing space? A big example is at Graham, that they are using, in some cases, full classrooms for a resource teacher that has 1 or 2 kids in there, because they just don't have another space, a conference-sized space that they could use. So can we make sure that there's enough space for all of these different uses so that that can free up adequate classroom space for our growth? That's the process that they're going through. But we do believe we will need to add classrooms, especially at Graham.
What does 20% circulation mean?
Where
Says
are you-
classrooms based on 960 square feet with 20% circulation. Is that 20% of kids moving in any given time?
20% extra square footage.
It's like you can't fill up 960 square feet
Mm.
full of.
Oh, so deduct 20% for
Yes,
open
yeah,
space.
Yeah, you don't
Lanes.
have,
Okay.
yeah, you can't use
Okay.
960
Alright,
square
thanks, I
feet.
hadn't seen that
Yeah.
notation before.
And then the STEM labs, what we've talked about there, and how the sites are really talking about using that is that STEM, the concept is, can you have, like math and science, enough room so that if you were teaching them something together, they could come together in a large area. So we are trying to look at, do each of the sites have adequate, some classroom space that would facilitate that kind of classes or joint project use or things like that. Not only big enough, but does it have sinks and enough electrical equipment, et cetera, to make those things feasible. And they do have some ideas in mind with existing space to reconfigure it so it could do that kind of classroom. So, what my goal was to go through each of these so that you have a flavor of what those are. And as you can see, there's details underneath that, and we won't get the final details until the end of schematic designs, exactly how that's gonna be broken down, but I think we could just do as an example is, do these things fit into the bond language, and I think we could just pick one and look for that as an aside. So does anybody wanna volunteer one?
Here, find the track.
And the bond language is in the very first tab.
Yep, it's about 8 or 9 pages down. Short page.
Whole pages or right side?
Well, but there's
One.
specifics, but there's
Sheets.
5 or 6 page attachment that has details. The
Oh,
75
yeah,
word
yeah.
statement in there that
Yeah, you go
says-
through the first 2 packets and then it's the next sheet. Is that right?
Yeah, the first two staple packets.
Pass those,
That's in there.
First,
pass that one,
two,
pull it up by the side, pull it up by the staple, till you get to the next
On the left-hand
section.
side.
So. Pass
Yeah,
the
front
first staple
tab.
thing and the second staple thing.
There you go. Keep going.
one.
Yeah, it's about halfway in.
Yeah, that's your G vowel. Oh.
Project
Yeah.
lists are on D
I
one.
did pick the one, sorry.
That's good. The
Good,
gooder-
you
the
guys
gooder the
say
better.
it.
She said
Track.
track. Let's find the track in there. Can you find it? Facilities.
I mean, how you could tie it back to it.
Yeah, so which word in this ballot language?
Yeah.
Word or word, so.
It says track.
Or, oh, okay, so I went to project list, but yeah, the ballot language is used.
In theory, there should be something general enough. Yeah, facilities might be the only. That word is pretty general, isn't it? Facilities. The language could have been instruct
schools,
facilities.
Sites and facilities.
Yeah.
That whole thing is really general, isn't it? Instruct
To me, this, what's the
schools.
difference constructing a school on a site? What does that mean? Anybody know? No.
Which means anything
Oh,
that
it's like,
fit
it
in
doesn't have to be, because we could do this around this, we could do.
Oh, I see. It's not a school, it's some other thing.
Special education campus.
So,
Okay, so it's specific, so if you dig deeper into the language, if you go into the subsequent pages, we should be able to find at least a phrase or something that addresses every single expenditure that we see. So if you go to page B4, you'll find the track.
you go to page B.
B-4, and it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 lines down. It says fields and turf may be upgraded for safety and operational efficiency.
You're on page D4.
E4.
These
Yeah.
are the details of the measure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is all the stuff that went out to voters also when they voted on it.
So the voters adopted this exhibit as part,
Yes.
although it didn't,
It wasn't in the ballot.
Yeah,
wasn't
it
valid.
It was
This
in
whole
the,
thing
it
was
was in
printed
the
in the ballot.
booklet. Yeah, in the booklet. You
Yeah.
get the language is what you vote next to, that
Okay.
paragraph is what you vote next to.
You remember
And
reading
this
the
is in
ballot.
the.
Well, I can't claim to have read the whole thing. I just threw darts.
But that's why that's why this is a good example, because every single thing that we talk about
So-
has to tie back to the language here.
So, have we, I mean, I think I missed the meeting, but we haven't had a conversation amongst ourselves. I mean, this is great that we're doing this, but it illustrates for me, we haven't had a conversation amongst ourselves, how we read this. It might be an interesting conversation to have before we vote on anything, for example. And, you know, my sort of question that I would put to the group is, these are, so that there's 2 ways to read something like this, right? It has a list of things which are permissible,
Enumerated.
enumerated things. And the question that I have is, do we need to make sure all of the enumerated things happen?
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Well,
So,
I was gonna
but
ask a
let's
question
talk
related
about
to that
that.
next.
Let's talk about
and what I meant, and we should talk about that, but the way I would read that first word would be probably to say, you know, if for example, there was hazardous lead/asbestos materials in the school.
Yeah, where is that? I didn't see that on the project list.
And were they not,
I'll give an example.
were they not removed? So if you spent all the money and you left hazardous materials/lead, would you be would the project be in compliance with this ballot?
That's an interesting question.
And that is a question that I have no idea what the answer is to, but I'm just being
So
lawyer picking up on
let's
that.
use that as an example. So the place, we've done a lot of abatement over time.
Sure.
So, but the place in this particular, ballot measure, why that was put in there is because in the windows, we've got original windows in many of our sites.
Sure.
And if you remove those, it will expose lead paint, et cetera, and we would have to go and abate those. So at this particular project, that might not be, it might not make sense to replace the windows at this particular project. But if we do replace windows and it exposes the lead paint, it would behoove us, and it was part of our intention to remove the lead paint as part of that. But would we be out of compliance? I think those are the conversations we should have with an auditor present to talk about, and that's what I would say. The audit comes in September, and so we're trying to build our repertoire to that meeting with.
So not with an attorney?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would agree.
Well, they're,
That'll be anyway.
the auditor is responsible for compliance. I mean, I'd be happy to ask the question to an attorney, but I think it is a valid question, and the second part of it, that's where it goes to effective and efficient. If we're removing if we're changing out the windows, isn't it prudent and effective and efficient for us to do the lead abatement at that time? That's the role of this committee, to talk about, isn't this really the best way to go about that? So it's a great example. Whether or not we're in compliance, I think we need to ask I would say the auditor, because that's their role to say if we're in compliance, but it could also be an attorney.
Yeah, my hunch is it probably, not to be lawyer-centric here, because I happen to be one, but I think it would be smart to read this. And I think for us, right, personally, I think that we wanna know what this means sooner rather than later.
Right.
Because I think if you come to us with things to be audited,
Exactly.
we want to already have, I think it'd be best if we had an idea of how we feel about this as a group before that comes to pass, because I think it's critical.
And
Is that
that's
our
it,
first vote?
those are the
September?
examples,
Supposed to be our
those are the
first vote.
examples. What I've done in, I'll just use the parcel tax committee as the example, is that we will come in with line items, and the role of the committee is to say, where does this line item fit into this, what section does it fit into? And we actually do a list, here's the line items that we're recommending, and here's the section that it aligns with.
Right.
And it's not line by line, but you're saying, here's the category, we believe that it is appropriately
Yeah, that's,
within the language, and that's what we're trying to lead towards, getting to that.
My hunch is that you will be able to find some category to fit almost anything to do with a
That's
school
true.
under this list of projects, because even the general language is so general that I have trouble just imagining something that was in this budget that
It's not a facility.
And that's-
it's not a facility, that isn't involving a facility.
There have been other districts that
Yeah.
has been the case, and that's the compliance role
Right.
of this group. But effective and efficiency, that's really where the discussion, I think, I doubt that we're gonna have a compliance issue necessarily. I think it's gonna be, wouldn't it make more sense to do the lead abatement when you're working on the windows than not?
But-
If we came to you without that as part of it.
But if there was some aspect of these enumerated items that were completely unaddressed, that I'm kind of, and
We're
we
gonna
decided
ask-
there was
and I think
problem.
that's a.
We're
I
gonna
think the
ask
same
the question.
Yeah.
At the same point, I mean, you read this and you can immediately find many things that are not gonna be addressed, and I don't see here,
Well,
Like
the
what?
project list may include, I
It
see
says, no,
that
the
I-
very first line, the list of projects will be completed as needed.
Yeah, so
very first
I
sentence.
know, cause we
These
talked
are-
about
this
this
is not a
with the
mandatory.
attorneys.
Right, okay, so
hold
that's
on,
that.
so let me just see it.
At the top of that paragraph on
Yeah.
page B4. And we've talked about this with the attorney beforehand, so as far as compliance, I'm happy to go back and confirm. But as far as
Well, as long as you already had
compliance,
that conversation.
I'll confirm that exact detail, but for compliance purposes, I'm not concerned that we will have a compliance issue. But I still think that if that's a meaty subject to talk about, is if you've met the letter of the agreement, but are you really doing it in the best way? That's where I think the conversations go.
There's one more dimension, I think, that came up in the parcel tax, which is if voters, when let's assume that most voters, just like not everybody reads the 40-page iTunes agreement with your phone, not every voter read the whole B through, B1 through B5 pages.
Right.
If they read the ballot language that said asbestos, earthquake, okay, then a question is the district somewhat on the hook to do some of those things or not? Like, in the next bond in 12 years, list asbestos and earthquake safety as the first two things if they were on this list but not done. And so that's not a compliance question, but more like right, when this was put on the ballot a certain way, what did people think? What do we think people expected to be getting for their money? And are they gonna get it or some other thing?
That's what I think is the role of this committee, is to have an auditor, make sure we're in compliance, but beyond that, are we doing it in the best and meaningful way?
Spirit,
in
intent,
the spirit and
yeah.
intent, and that example is what highlights that. If we decided that we had to cut because it just couldn't fit to do that, are we really meeting what we were supposed to meet? And I think that's the discussion, and that is the role of this committee to, it's not approval or not, but if you're saying, we don't think you're meeting the true intention of what the voters passed, and you put that out there to the public, that is gonna make it very, very difficult to pass the bond the next time. It's gonna raise questions. I mean, that's why this group is there,
Well,
to give that kind of feedback and hold us publicly
But I think
accountable.
I think we need to have that conversation about what it is that what we're doing in terms of how we read this at some point. And I know we're starting to have that conversation now, but I think my own view of it is it's important to have that, so that the district knows how we feel about it, right? I mean, I think
That's why we're building to this. As the pieces come in, I think we build the next phase of the conversation so that we can get to a common understanding and that you guys have enough material so that you can analyze, is there a concern or not? And right now, I don't think you have enough material necessarily
And
to do that.
some of this stuff is gonna happen when they touch, I just did some work on that, when they touch a wall, they're improving earthquake safety, because there's codes that have gone up.
But if we don't
Yeah.
change the building, if they don't pull out and they're just doing the furniture
Well-
inside, they're not gonna necessarily touch that building.
And that is a question that I don't understand, just because I'm just beginning to immerse myself in this, but if you told us that you had an earthquake risk, that was a particular risk, right, you had some facility or some structure, which we know today, we're not gonna touch because it's old and dilapidated, and nobody cares about it, but you told us it was really a problem. If we knew that it was really a problem,
I think that's the conversation that we
to
would have.
me, I would be concerned if we left that off. And I have no idea whether there
And
is or isn't, but
that's why architects also and the program managers also come and present to the Citizens Oversight Committee, because I think that those are the kinds of conversation. You have an audit, which is checking the nitty gritty, and I think you've got the intent and is this the best way of doing it conversation. Those are the two conversations that are going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this is an important starting, and I think we have another meeting, and that's where I think we could really go, and I would do a draft of, here's the line item, here's where it matches up with this, and we could have that conversation. And I'm happy to do the homework with the attorney, just to come back with specifics on what that paragraph means.
So in our June meeting, we're not on item
Yes.
5 yet, but, we're not gonna have to vote on anything then, right?
No, I think the first action is gonna be in the September meeting, cause
So we'll
we're
have one in
building.
September.
So are you
towards-
suggesting in June we have this conversation?
That would be timely.
I think that'd be fine.
I think it would be really good to really have that conversation.
Fine,
Does anyone else agree?
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so what should we call it in the minutes as our request for the future agenda item, interpretation of bond
I
language?
would like, I think we wanna have a discussion, I think we wanna, have a discussion amongst ourselves for what it means, probably after we get some input from someone who, an attorney.
Okay.
I do think it's an attorney, I think there's a question.
We have a
as to-
bond attorney, it's
A
not
bond
difficult
attorney,
to have.
somebody who can read this and tell us what it means, and I think we wanna have a conversation amongst ourselves, how we feel about it after we hear what it tells them.
Did the bond attorney write that language?
Yes,
No, there's no better way to get it.
exactly. That's why I'm happy to follow up with him, it's not,
Please.
David Casanova.
Casanova.
David Casanova, yes.
I agree with your concern. I think if you were to use 10 pieces of paper for each item that we have here, that we never, on our interpretation is way, definitely. It's very broad, very broad, and if you ask me what is facilities, you would say, hell no, that's not what I meant,
Yeah,
and so on and so forth.
yeah.
And that's a very good idea to have a
Right.
lawyer come in,
Right.
tell us, it will also be in a very broad way what they might think they mean by facilities as it applies, so we can get on the same page.
Great,
Okay?
great. That's why I'm happy that we can build up to some of these things, cause I think we're sort of laying out the pieces and I wanna get to a framework that really works.
And I also want to state about this asbestos issue, nothing except a set of cement. You try and cover all the bases that you can with the money that you have, that's why you have priority list.
Yeah.
So I agree with that statement about supposing we do the windows, we find a different chrome after we can do the windows. That's open to interpretation also. It doesn't mean we're not complying with the word in the bond issue, it just means that common sense tells us that we have to do this, and we're gonna.
Well,
But I think your role in particular is about, I think that there is, I think we wanna resolve the compliance issue, cause I think that to me is stop, we are not going any further if there's a compliance issue, so we've gotta solve that. But once we know the compliance issue, I really think that's the purpose of this group, is to be able to stand in place of the community and say, we believe that they are meeting the intent of what was supposed to happen to the best of their ability, and that's what we wanna get to that conversation, as we're going through these projects. That's what, we wanna have enough conversation ahead of time, so that when we come with that list, people are ready to say yes, or here's where I'm concerned and what can we do about it, so that we get to where our goal is that you as a committee are comfortable sharing with the community that yes, we're meeting the intention here. That's what we wanna accomplish. Okay, so I wanna be
So
respectful.
we'll keep track of those
Okay,
things when we get to the future agenda items, so we
Yes.
agree on that stuff.
great.
so did we decide that we're gonna have that on?
The next
I think we
meeting.
should decide that at that part of the meeting, but that's a good idea,
We're
because
gonna-
these
we're
are
gonna-
items for future agenda
So
items.
that would be listed later. Is now a good time to propose something else to go with that, or should we wait till later to propose things to go with that?
Things to go with having a lawyer come.
Track it as we go.
Super quick question, do we have a document that lists all, I mean, I think we do, but that specifically addresses the items in number 2, which are earthquake risks, fire dangers, hazardous materials, that sort of thing, that lists all of those issues?
The document,
Some document that says these are the
Not.
risks.
oh, the
Oh.
outstanding list of earthquake problems.
Earthquake, or all of the things that are listed in the risks part, number 2 there, that's, I don't.
So let me
Specific
come
to
back,
our
because
facility?
Yes,
we've
it's
done,
yes.
so
Okay.
let me answer it with, I don't wanna say yes definitively, but we have done a needs assessment that outlines and has reviewed some of those. I don't know off the top of my head every single thing it has addressed in that, but
are you looking at the page?
What do you, when you're talking about item two, what do you?
I'm looking at the full text of the ballot prop, B1, item 2.
Oh, okay, back in these.
So,
Back in-
so the answer is yes.
Yes.
It has been assessed.
Okay.
To the exact level of detail, I can't express that off the top of my head, but there was needs assessments with many of those items done, and if they are going into a building, they have to do testing, et cetera, so there will be additional work done as we go, but I could go back and look at
I can
what.
chime in a little bit. They went through every single classroom, they went through old design, all of the old design plans, any work that had been done along the way. If they had a question about a wall, they punched a hole to see what the construction was, to see if they needed earthquake upgrade. That was where some of the proposals came from in the master plan visioning document was, okay, we have to wipe this section anyway. I mean, the portables are grand, but they can't use, those are not ventilation safe, they're pre-95, but all of that kinds of stuff, they went through every single classroom on every single campus.
That's what.
So Jeremy, I'd like to see a list of all the things that need to be done to be able to verify that
Or
all
at
the
least-
schools must be healthy and safe.
Or at least all the risks that have been identified.
I mean, yeah,
Right.
everything that is either earthquake risk, fire danger, hazmat, asbestos, lead, paint, and mold. Like a list by school,
Yeah.
yes, this, that, and then you'd like to be able to say, so, will someone initial that every single one of these got, done?
Well,
And I
but-
think the
And
question
then I
is,
will
do
say
you
yes.
wanna see that?
Well, I don't.
Some of these do.
Well, I'll tell you how it's typically looked at, is that that's where you have your architect is who, as they're doing the design, they've got to pull in all of those resources and be able to say, our design is meeting that this building is safe and meets all of these criteria. So the conversation would really be with the architect here, presenting the project list, the final, after schematic design, here's the project list with the budget, et cetera. And that's where they would need to be able to articulate that they've met all of those criteria.
That's for new construction, right?
Some of it is new construction, it really depends on it depends on the projects that they're outlining. Each of them have a different impact on it. So for example, even if it's not new construction, taking out the windows impacts hazardous materials, et cetera, or the heaters
Right.
systems in an existing building, but it might not affect the seismic activity because they're not touching the
Right,
walls.
that's what I'm getting to, it might not be as comprehensive as I think you guys are getting to.
That is the architect's role and responsibility
I
to
think there was a
to
section
do
in the
that.
school facilities improvement plan that was called out.
It outlines.
Every one of those issues,
But there's
yeah.
a
The
needs
document that
assessment that was done, and the
You're
person
thinking
that
conditions and
did,
needs analysis.
that's what you're thinking of,
Yeah,
and
it
that's
does.
not,
Yeah, it's in there,
And
right?
it's just not sorted by that category, it's sorted by school.
but the
Everything
architect's
else.
responsibility is to have reviewed the needs assessment, present a design, and be able to articulate that in their opinion, they might say, we haven't met, I'm making this up, we
Go ahead.
haven't met every seismic issue here, but these seismic issues are all grandfathered in, and these are not things that other districts are doing. I'm making up how they would phrase it.
Okay.
But
In effect,
they
that's
should
for
be
an
able to
audit
come and
of
articulate that.
That class of problem,
Yeah, that's what
right?
it's.
A list of all the things and see if they're all
That's-
checked.
It strikes me that we want, it strikes me that we wanna know what were the risks that were identified. If we're reading this, the way I wonder how we're gonna read it, if we read it to say, we don't wanna leave a giant honking earthquake issue unaddressed. If there was one left unaddressed, we wanna make sure that anything that was identified got
Yeah,
addressed.
I agree.
And
So
that-
it'd be
and that's
helpful to have the needs assessment or the needs analysis, document.
Available somewhere.
Yeah.
As a reference
Well,
document.
online, you can click on it.
But-
You
download it.
absolutely can see it, but I don't want us to believe that that's our responsibility at that level of detail. That is the architect's responsibility. I think what's appropriate
Okay.
is the architect needs to report to a certain level, and I will ask them how they how they would respond to that question, but I don't think it's fair to consider
I
a
guess
layman's group
Sure.
having that level of knowledge
Well,
to do that.
We're never
That's,
gonna, we're never
Mr.
gonna,
Murray.
we're never gonna.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We only have a couple more minutes. I don't know if we got we did initial cost summary, right? That's this page.
Yeah.
But we didn't get the preliminary schedule yet. I don't know if we want to spend any time on that, but we
oh,
need to finish
so
that up.
all that I would
Can I
tell
ask
you
one
is
question, just number 7, when it says we need to reduce, the district must reduce operating costs, so we're gonna be seeing numbers about that too then, before and after?
Let's produce.
So they will, so if we're doing, the example would be HVAC, and the way that we would show it is you're typically doing a payback analysis, so it
Okay.
shows current operating expenses and afterwards, yes. Okay, can you record those, and I wanna make sure that this part is in the minutes so that I know the action is with the architect.
Oh,
Just
record meeting, just type it up.
I just wanna make sure that I have that, okay. So all that I'm highlighting on the schedule, this is, as I've said it before, this is our preliminary schedule. Our objective is by the end of the summer, that we will have a detailed budget and schedule, but we are still, our broad schedule is that they're doing schematic design. They are going to be done with that this summer, and then they will start working on their construction documents, and our goal is to start construction by next summer, so that it will finish by the following summer. It does take about 6 months' time to have the plans go through the state, inspection, and so some of the construction that doesn't have to go through inspection like that might start earlier, some of it might be queued up a little bit later, depends on how long that process takes. Yes,
It's $25 million
I'm
that's
sorry.
actual cost
I
right
didn't
now.
hear what you said.
$25 million is actual cost right now, or essentially projected cost.
So these are cost estimates right now, and these are based on both the architect and the program manager looked at actual construction costs of other projects that they did. So there is some basis behind these cost estimates, but they haven't, until they outline and have the exact details of what they're gonna do, that's why it's a cost estimate right at this time. But what we will have at the next step, a project category with a detailed list with a project budget. And that is an approved document, that if we make any modifications to that, it comes back for approval on that. So it'll have that level of detail that people can go back and forth to match up to.
So it has to be $2015. I mean, what it ends up being is all you can spend in 2015.
Yes, exactly,
Even if the dollar gets
exactly. Without
changes.
coming back for approval.
Yeah.
So that's where the project stands right now, and we're building our role, and my expectation is that's why I was hoping with our one more meeting before, and then in September, we'll actually be reviewing information, and I think coming up with, are we prepared to submit it out to the community that we're in compliance, and we have other recommendations for how we monitor this moving forward. So that's September's meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
We haven't picked a date for that yet, or is it the
I
last
have
Tuesday?
some.
All right, review and action, number 3.
So for the amended bylaws, what happened was that after we had set up the committee and had adopted the bylaws, the Proposition 39 law changed where we could do, it started out where you could only have 2 2-year terms, and now it's gone to 2 3-year terms. And so what we recommended was amending the bylaws, I think we did it at the last meeting, so that we could have staggered terms for everybody, and there was there's no process set up. So what I had recommended to Greg, and I'm open to discussion, but I was basically looking for if people wanted to volunteer for any of the particular slots. So at a minimum, people would have 4 years, because you'd have, the first term would be 1 year, and then you'd go into your second term, which would be 3 years. So at a minimum, people would be eligible for 4 years, and then it would be 4, 5, and 6, and then we'd have people roll into there. So I was opening that up. I know that people have stayed on the parcel tax committee for an extended period of time, but some people also stay according to the age of their children. So I thought it would be open from that point of view. The only other thing I thought I would be happy to do it on a lottery basis if nobody wants to volunteer for it. It just helps if we do it staggered, because then we don't lose the history of
You want
people.
to answer that now, or you want to put down the other decision now?
That's my proposal is that, but it's not something that we have to resolve right this minute. I just am putting it out there, so maybe if people wanna think about it, I'm open, Greg, if you wanna have people think about it, and then we can decide at the next meeting.
I actually cut up straws today, but I don't have them.
Okay.
I don't know what happened to them.
So we're
I
open.
spent this time getting straws, measuring them, put a rubber band around them, I don't have the straws.
But
we could've
it's
done it
really
tonight by
just to
drawing
present,
stuff.
yeah, it's really just to give you guys, that's, the need is that we wanna make sure, and people generally
How many of each?
kind of
do you
have
want?
in their mind.
3 of each.
3 of each?
3 of each of the 4, the 5, and the 6 years.
Well,
Yes,
what we're
yes.
picking is the 1 year before you
And
need to
then
be
you renew.
Yes, it's
renewed.
4, 5, and 6, it's
So,
the same.
so we all start at the beginning of this year,
Uh-huh.
so 3 of us need to finish a term at the end of the year.
Yes.
3 will finish a term at the end of next year, and 3 the following.
New conversion,
That's,
Take forever.
I think
And then go on
what's
for
fair,
another
if
3
people are prepared,
Correct.
or if somebody
If
wants
you're
to
on a 3-year
volunteer,
term.
it's
If
fine.
not.
If people are not, then our alternative was to do it on a lottery kind of basis.
So you
Well,
do
by
1 plus
default,
3 or
this
2
role
plus 3 or
is
2
a
plus
non-voting
three.
Yours
and-
is not.
I'm gonna do 2 years. 3 years.
You can quit
You
at
will
any
be,
time. That's
you will
fine.
be phased in
Yeah,
and
I'll
out
be phased in and out.
as the
Looks like
committees are
Ellen's sitting here,
chosen.
just waiting for the seat.
She wants it. She's gonna phase you out.
3 years, huh?
So you just said you do a 1 and a 3.
Everybody's
You get at least
second
4.
term will be 3 years.
If you wanted to stay on the thing for 3 years.
You can, yes, I mean, but your term will be 3 years. It's just the first term that we're setting up staggered so that it'll formulate a staggered
Yeah.
system as
If
well.
anybody wants to see it, it's in the bylaws there.
Go ahead, I'll do 2.
Okay,
You volunteer for 2, Jessica. Does
Okay.
anybody else volunteer?
Okay, and then you start 3
I'll
after.
do 1.
It's still 4 years, it can still stretch to 4 years, so it's not that short.
but that's why I think people, a lot
We
of
got
people
2
do
ones
it
and
kind
a
of
2.
by their kids.
And Jordan, what did you want?
Okay,
Uh.
you wanna do it one? Okay.
How many
I'll
ones
just
did
get
you
one.
want?
Did you
We
need
need 3.
So I have 3, 1,
I'll-
2,
I'll
3,
do
and you'll do
Palmer,
2,
take
Jeremy will do 2,
So
Jessica,
Charlie or
I'll
Bob?
take,
Oh, okay.
so you need somebody to take 3 though, right?
yes,
Okay, I'll take a 3, that's fine.
3 years, you mean.
Yeah.
yes, no, 3, it's 6 years. It's 6 years.
Whoa.
Well, right, but
Yes.
that's if I choose to run.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes, yes.
This is being replaced.
Wait, what?
Depends on
It's,
myself.
you can do a maximum of 6 years.
Okay, so do you understand? Did you have a question?
No, I don't get the 2 versus 3 versus 6.
Okay, so let me just try it real simple. So,
We're trying to get everything.
our initial term, like, when we first got here, we all felt the bylaws, we thought that we were all gonna be on this for 3 years.
Right.
But we missed a part of the bylaws where it said,
2, actually, the
oh,
law
it said 2, it
changed.
said 2 in there. So we
Yeah,
all thought it
the
was gonna
law
be 2 years.
changed.
But then, one thing we didn't follow was, they want they want people to have staggered,
We don't want everybody to leave at the same time. You
Staggered
lose
departures.
participation.
so there's overlap. So we just need to get 3 of us, just like,
Is this just the length of the first term, and then you can follow it on with another 3 years if you want?
Okay, that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's 1 plus 3 or 2
Not
plus 3 or 3
No,
plus 3.
it's
Okay.
1 term and then you can renew for another 3 years.
You want the full six.
So, but if you wanna
What?
sit up
Commitment.
front.
Right, so what I'm saying is I won't do the full 6.
Okay.
No, it should always be
Okay,
amended.
so we have
What do
1,
you need
2, 3, 4, 5. So do you wanna, what would
I'll
be
take
your
whatever you
favorite?
want.
The 3 plus 3
2,
is.
okay.
You want 3 at least,
Christie.
so you get 2 or 3.
yeah, you.
Well, yeah, 'cause
Well,
you wanna put
Kindergarten,
Yeah.
so kindergarten was 5 years.
Okay, now you have
And Greg,
6.
you're 3?
fine, and then Peter stuck with 3.
You
And Peter's stuck with 3.
You
I don't
want
think
me to
Peter's
do the
gonna
whole
want
Not
to
that crafty.
Well, then he's gonna show up.
Okay, does anybody, if Peter is concerned about being 3, would anybody have
I'm
that
not
be
very
their
honest.
alternative?
I'm not.
Okay. Alright, there we go.
It doesn't really, like you're saying.
You can
Wait,
always.
it
Peter,
just
Peter
doesn't
could
really
resign
matter.
it, it's
You can
posted any
resign
moment,
anytime.
unless there's some sort of.
All that we're doing
Is
is
the
setting
second
up
term
the
is
system.
automatic?
Some sort of.
If you renew, it's your choice. It's your
But
choice.
there's no
But you
vote or
cannot
anything.
you cannot be more than 6 years.
Right, but
We
there's
have
no
to-
vote or anything, it's not like someone has to go out to the community, you
No.
wanna do your second term.
No,
right?
we will
This
have
is-
at a meeting, we will say your term's coming
Right.
up, are you renewing or not? We'll just formalize it.
But it also gives the board then the opportunity to, when they go out to the community to fill our spaces, they can say, we have a 1-year term and a 2-year term, what are you, you know, what do you need? Right.
I got it.
No, good, Jessica.
No, I have everybody. I got everybody. Thank you.
These guys
Yeah,
know.
I got it.
Or, it just, it doesn't, someone get mad or something.
As long as we've got it staggered a little bit, that's all that I needed to make sure. Okay, that was it on there, and then,
Oh, and so on next agenda, you can put people's expiration year
yes.
next to their name.
Uh-huh.
Or the
Term.
term, the year
We'll
that their
put the
term
term.
expires,
The year they
next to their name.
Expired.
Okay, review of potential auditors.
Yes. That was on this sheet, in front of Crittenden.
As long as we're flipping to new pages, can I make a request? I don't mean to be a pain in the neck, but can we have something that's bound in the middle so
I was
we
gonna
can
make a request on this too.
actually-
What would be
This is
wrong with
not
a binder?
useful.
With dividers, does that work?
It can, I would really like to use these, I apologize, I've been flying all day today, I just got in and saw this when I got here at about 5 o'clock and didn't have time to switch it.
Oh,
But
switch it to
the
what?
intent, so that they'd be all together, the intent of this, and why I would like to keep this, but I would do it in a different way. Have the ballot language
Yep.
in the very front. And then
Good.
your current meeting is here,
Good.
all the backup from prior meetings goes here, and then,
Okay, but you can't flip pages, I can't look at the upside down double sided.
That's just 'cause you're the
then
way
we
you're
have
not
to,
gonna copy.
then we have to change it into a different kind of.
Okay,
code.
okay.
But
Okay.
why would that be better than
Yeah,
just
she
using
just
a
photo-
binder?
I'm
Yeah.
fine with doing a binder, but I just wanna have, we'll go and look, I wanna have a system that has a divide in it, that's all
Excellent
that
idea.
I want.
Sure.
It's just so much simpler to just
Yeah.
punch them like
This
in
is-
a binder.
And this is difficult to read, I totally agree.
Trappers, okay, same thing, I'm trying to get it correct, trappers and trapper keeper
Okay.
is, our standard, our standard. Or
It's
peachy
been a
folders,
while since
did you use peachy folders?
Yes.
I miss Jacob Peters.
Okay, so we are on the auditor, and, this is something that, because I want to start the audit in July and August, I would like to, have a discussion about it tonight. What I did, I got a list of probably 6 auditors that various districts around here use. And I started calling, I had talked to people around here who they were using, and then I called auditors that they recommended and got a flavor of what work they were doing and how they approached the bond, audits. And I wanna say, I'll go through each of them, but I wanna just tell you kind of what was the consistent message that I heard, is that, everybody that I talked to certainly does a similar type of audit where they're looking at, are you in compliance and making recommendations, et cetera. But the consistent message I heard was, we really wanna do all of your audit business, we will do your bond audit, but, it's much more efficient for us if we have a team that is also doing your financial audit. And I believe that, that is what got reflected in the pricing, is that, unless we were switching our financial audits to them, their prices were higher than the person who's currently doing our financial audit.
So your current
I just
financial
wanted-
audit is not one of these 3?
It is.
It's one of these 3,
Yes,
which one?
Siobhan and Associates.
The first one.
Yes, so I
That's
am.
the cheapest you're saying?
Yeah, so I am recommending him, we've been happy with him as our auditor, and we do go on a rotation of going out and looking for new auditors, just as part of our internal controls. and we will do that probably within the next, I think he's up, I think this has been his third year. We just finished his third year. Okay, so we have 2 more years. So my recommendation is that we do, look at Shalom and Associates, but I do wanna talk about the things that I evaluated for each of them.
We gotta do it quick though.
Okay,
We
I'll
have
be very
7
quick.
or 8 minutes
So
left.
the name, the auditors, they are all set up where they have a CPA is the primary partner, and then they have a supervisor that's managing the field team. Their qualifications, all of these groups specialize in, school districts and government, and why that's important is because the auditing standards are very specific for these groups. And some firms that are doing all sorts of different audits, I just think aren't as, able to give us good feedback on how that affects us as a district. Location, I do think it's important to have a close location because they do come and spend a lot of time here, and being able to call them and know that they know who our contractors are and will go and spend the time. I think that's important to have somebody that's close by. The scope of work, they did talk about it slightly differently, but I did confirm with each of them that they are fundamentally doing the same things. They are all going out, looking at, they're going out to the contractors' offices, looking at all their procurement and all of their invoices, they're checking all of our financial records, they're, comparing us to other districts, et cetera, to make sure that we're having good benchmarking, et cetera. They're looking for risk, fraud, they're interviewing key people to make sure, are you concerned about anything? Are there any internal controls? They also help us document all of our internal controls and review all of that. So it's a very thorough auditing process for all of these. And the references, I'm gonna skip price for 1 second, I'll come back to it. The references, I picked schools that were at least, somewhat close so that we knew somebody who was their reference, and all of them did have, strong references. There was nothing that came up during that. Experience, it does vary. Certainly, Christy White is sort of a mid-sized firm, and VTB is a very large firm. Siobhan and Associates is a much smaller firm, and he left the larger firm to branch out on his own. And then some notes is just that they were committing to their pricing and weren't gonna have a lot of add-ons as we went. So pricing, as I said, the reason why there was such a difference between them was because Sheldon does our district financial audits. I didn't solicit ahead of time, what the pricing was. He gave us a bid, before he knew that we were even going out to other bids. So I don't think he was trying to reduce his price, I just think that's how, he was staging it. So we've been very happy with Sheldon as our auditor. He does come through every year and look at different components of our internal controls and gives a lot of feedback on it's going well, here's some areas that you could improve upon, and then he'll follow up with us the next year. Have we done those things? Is it working well, et cetera? I think he's done a good job. So that's my recommendation.
So the board will decide this at some point?
They will, but I wanted you guys to have
How soon do
I'll
they
take
decide, do
them.
you know?
I just will take it on a contract approval,
Consent agenda.
agenda. Yeah,
So-
I mean, I would probably go on the 16th of May.
So I'm kind of curious personally. Oh, so it looks like Christy White has the most experience with bond audits.
Yes.
Doesn't look, the BTD, they didn't list any.
Well,
It's unclear if they do.
the issue for BTD is that because they're such a large firm, I only focused on their Palo Alto office.
Okay.
And
That would be, they'd be the ones doing the work, or would someone in a different office that does bonds?
No, they would be the ones doing the work, but that's why it looks smaller than Christy White, because Christy White is including everything up and down the state that they do.
But the BTD didn't include any bond
They
audits.
didn't tell us the numbers.
That's not good, right? But, how do you decide whether it's better to have a different auditor for this different role than the normal one that does the books? the business over here, right? Siobhan, I'm not gonna try to speculate what their motivations are and all their interests, but they already have a book of business with the district. So
So-
why not,
For
if you want someone impartial, why not?
Well, an
Go with somebody
auditor,
else.
my honest response to you is that an auditor is an impartial party. That is the job of the CPA
They're
to do
supposed
that.
to.
But secondly, we go out and we'll, in my past experience, I don't know the history of the audit with the district, but in my past experience, it was part of my protocol to change auditors after a cycle, because you want somebody new to come in and look over. That should be part of your internal controls. So I don't see this, where they need to hold on to my business forever, because I wouldn't do that as part of a normal accounting standards. I think he's done a good job. He has brought things to light in terms of our process, helped us look at some things in a little bit of a different way. But I think that is their role to do that. And I think, when you're checking references with other people and seeing if things have been raised, the job of the auditor is to highlight if there's a material misrepresentation
Mhm.
in your financial statements. And so
Not this one. That's not this auditing job.
in compliance, it is, so their role is there a material issue in your bond expenditures?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's similar in terms of they're looking at all the records and seeing, has anything in our financial documents been misstated because the information wasn't properly recorded or monitored? It's the same type of auditing process where you're looking at how do you collect financial information and report it, and do you have enough control over that to say that this is good information?
That's one thing, and then there's the measure.
Right, and they're not, and this.
These are different
This
things.
is, well, I agree with you, but I think the point is that part of it is definitely, like, okay, so let's say, we are told that money is going to be spent on filling the blank earthquake survey. They're gonna tell us that the money was spent doing the things that was supposed to be done. There's a separate question, which is the project fulfilling what it's supposed to fulfill in the bond measure? And that's something that sounds like they're gonna give us some guidance on, right?
That is,
They'll
but
issue an opinion on that.
But based on our conversation,
Yeah.
I think there's two other pieces of guidance that you guys have already asked for
Yeah.
that would go a layer on top
would
of
go a layer on
that.
top
One
of
is
that.
the bond attorney who needs to
Right.
fill in interpretation and
Right.
intent information. And the second, in terms of, are we meeting intent and meeting a high quality standard, I guess,
Yeah.
is the way to phrase it. The architect's role is to come and say, if we are doing a building, are we meeting the earthquake needs and the hazardous materials, et cetera. So all of these come together to do that. I do think that you raise a legitimate point, Greg. I do think that there is, how do you choose one auditor over the other? These are the criteria that I look at for people, and I think the real fundamental issue is their job is to highlight if financial information is following what it's supposed to follow in terms of meeting the bond, and does it look normal in what they're doing, and I think that he's done a very good job of reviewing that for the district. I'm not committing that this is the same auditor every year. I think we could look at it at least every 2 years, if not more.
How long has he been in the program?
I think this was his
It's our third
year.
cycle
In
with him.
ballpark, how much is the contract, do you know?
30 to 35,000
No, it's not.
It's small beans, the lawyers.
Yeah, the problem, the reason why I would back going with Siobhan
Not me.
is both, I've sat through audits with the man, and it's been really, really detailed and but the other thing is if we go with somebody else, you basically have to duplicate at least up to 50% of the work that Siobhan has already done, and then of course of a regular audit, because they need to look at, did the bond monies go for something else, or did something else go for bond projects, right? So they have to look at both sides of the book.
Well,
And
some
if
of
they
your
start-
internal
so like-
controls are going to apply to both
Right.
bond money and
Right.
your
I
other
would
financial.
just, my 2 cents, I would.
So we're not doing
go with
just
Siobhan.
for our information, because ultimately you may make a recommendation to
I'll
the
make
board,
it to-
and they will make a decision.
But I
Right.
do
She's
think
just-
No,
it's,
no, I hear you.
yeah, I want, this is somebody you
put on
guys are
myself.
gonna
Yeah.
rely on heavily for your opinions about how this is going, so I don't wanna just.
So the question is this group comfortable with?
Is this group
with your
comfortable with me
recommendation?
making a recommendation to the board
Why not?
to,
Fine with me.
to do that?
I'd wanna know what bond oversight committees, what their, did anybody ask other bond oversight committees who had worked with these auditors on bond audits and ask whether they thought they did a good job?
I think not.
Cause that's, for me to feel comfortable saying, yeah, get them or that, the other guy. That's the reference I'd want, but I don't know if anybody,
I don't remember that being as a trustee.
sorry?
I don't remember that being as a trustee, whether to go to the Oversight committee or not. I don't remember that. I remember that when we approve our bond measures, it gets straight from the administration, they make the recommendation.
Yeah, I talked to
That's why
other,
I said.
I talked to other,
I don't remember that
district,
happening before.
district staff.
Right, so I think that people on this oversight committee, in theory, should be looking to people on other oversight committees. And,
Well, here,
if there were a way to find out the
Let me-
references of
let me,
the perspective of those people, of these firms, would be what I put the most weight in, right? Cause then it's gonna be representatives of the people in theory, people that are standing in for the community, to say, I just thought that auditor, they just went along with what the district said, because they do the I don't feel like maybe that's what would be said, but I've never had any reason to go ask people, I've never met anybody in another, oversight committee that does, and talk about this sort of thing, so I don't know. I don't mean to be splitting hairs, but if I were tasked with finding an auditor, I'd go get references from people, the people of other oversight committees and say, well, who have you had and did you see a difference between them? And who's really good at getting the oversight committee the information they want to see, but I don't have any plan to go get that information, but I just don't feel like I should say, yeah, sure,
well,
because I don't
I,
have the information I'd wanna have to make that decision.
I mean, I think you're raising legitimate questions. I think the real issue that I'm putting out there, and I think it's good to have some, critical thinking about how to make the decision. So from that viewpoint, I totally appreciate it and know what you're saying. I do not wanna go into this discussion with a concern about an auditor that anybody that I bring in, cause you express some concern whether or not an auditor is really, and I'm putting out there, I'm walking in with, I know the people who have hired these different auditors, and they are not somebody who would go out and hire somebody that hasn't had good reputations and based on references, know that about them. So I do wanna go into this with that sort of starting point, but if you're not at that point, I would be happy to do more homework, but that's where I don't think that needs to be done because I'm starting at a different place.
And we're not having a vote on this thing.
No, but
And
but I
anyways,
don't
if you
wanna,
need a
I
majority,
don't wanna go
get a
into,
majority vote.
I don't wanna bring in an auditor that
Sure.
somebody has that concern, because I think that negates,
Right.
that's a bad starting
Right.
point with any auditor.
You're hiring a firm and any firm could send you a turkey. right?
Exactly,
Right,
but
so-
if that's a concern,
Or somebody really
I don't
good.
wanna start
Right.
there, because that would deflate the discussion when this person comes in. If you don't believe at a starting place that this person can come and present good information to you, you're not gonna get anywhere with that information. So I don't wanna have that, I don't wanna have anybody walk into that discussion with that as a starting point.
Can I
Okay.
just address Greg's comment? I think your comment is well taken, and I think maybe my response to it is simply that the way I wind up seeing the auditor playing a role here, it's going to be a very traditional auditor role in that this is the way I see it. I'm mistaken, but I think that the auditor is gonna tell us, is the money trail proper? Right? We're gonna have to think about that beyond that, the way Therese outlined before, but I don't know that the auditor is really gonna take us down that road that far, and I think that that's, as I imagine it, I wanna know that the money that was supposed to be spent in the right place is spent in the right place. And I don't see the difference being huge between someone who's done sort of this kind of audit versus someone who's done more general public audits. I think they have to be able to answer those questions. Was the money spent properly in terms of, was it out of the right accounts, and did it go for what was supposed to go for? Whether those projects were bond projects or not, I think is gonna be, whether they were actually in the intent and spirit of what the bond measure is sort of a separate question. I don't think the auditors really gonna have that much to say about that anyway. That's my guess.
I didn't think so, but then earlier this meeting, we heard that
That
they are gonna issue an opinion.
They provide some
Well,
input,
they
but
see
they
no
do provide
material.
input,
For
but that's not.
compliance, that's what, I'm gonna talk to the bond attorney. I'm gonna talk to the bond attorney, because I think it's a legal definition that we're looking at. I think
And
they have to talk about
We could very well
compliance.
supply the auditor with what our definition is also, and let them, what the definition is, not just our definition, but what we all think is right, and then they might give us some input on it, but I still think that critical role of figuring out what the standard is not something the auditors really do.
I
We
think
gotta
that
wrap it
that
up
is based on.
before Dana runs out.
Okay.
And I have to say that I trust your judgment. You've obviously done a ton of homework, you researched them all, you've gotten so much together, but I would, personally, I really trust your judgment and go with what you're gonna recommend.
Yeah.
Just, I want
But I
everybody to
understand the
walk
discussion, so
in
that's
a
fine.
comfortable place, that's my objective.
Would
So
anyone
I
like
vote for
to?
Siobhan.
You vote, oh, there's a vote now.
No, I'm so my 2 cents, I'm with Siobhan.
Yeah, what I would like is is there a need to gather additional information before I make a recommendation? That's what I'm asking for.
I don't think you guys.
We don't have any role in deciding who
He's
the
very
auditor,
professional.
so
There you
there's
go.
nothing, we have nothing more to state.
Just for information.
Okay, so then
Go
we
with
just need
item
to talk
4.
about, yeah.
Consent agenda. The minutes of the Citizens
Okay.
Oversight Committee meeting on January 29, 2013 are attached right behind the agenda. I presume these have been reviewed by members of the committee. Any motions to approve to move the consent agenda? Consisting of one item.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
Probably should be someone who's there.
Jessica moves.
Jessica moves, Leon seconds. Any discussion on the consent agenda items and minutes? All in favor of moving the consent agenda? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, unanimous, 8-0. And that's item 4. Item 5, items for future agenda items. We talked about having the lawyers come and talk to us a little bit. We did that.
And then I would add that risk part also, at some point, whether it's on this next meeting or not, I wanna know what they are.
That's what, yeah, I'm not positive if I can do that by June.
Okay, well.
But, let's put it on for a future agenda, that's why I wanted her to capture.
I would just like to have it before we wind up voting in September.
Fine.
Okay, so are you, just what I understand, Jeremy, specifically the breakdown of the needs assessment into different buckets that match the bond language, or what?
He's
No,
talking
no, no,
different,
no.
he's talking about the
I wanna,
hazards one.
my take is that I would like to know, there may be a document that summarizes this already, and speaking at a fair amount of ignorance here, but when we go to look to see if things are meeting the bond measure,
Mhm.
I wanna know what the risks were identified for the facilities, so that we can look and see if we think we're meeting what our intent.
Because
So-
B1 or whatever says something like all,
Yes.
So to start with, could Therese do 2 schools? Could she do Graham and Crittenden
Well, since
instead
those
of
yeah,
the
since
district?
those are the
So
only
that's
two
the
that-
only two that are in
since
action
those are
right now,
the-
right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
We're not trying to take on, go ahead.
For that presentation, we sent something to the board, those 2 fire inspectors from Miller Park. I would also be very concerned.
Well, that's the example. I don't know if
Right.
you guys were
I
aware
was
of
there.
that meeting, but they talked about putting in sprinklers in versus the fire monitoring
Right.
system.
Right.
And that's a perfect example of risk assessment, where the architect is saying, when we're doing this, we are upgrading the monitoring system, but we are not necessarily putting in sprinklers except for in a new building. I'm making this up.
So someone has
Somebody
identified
is-
fire as a risk,
Exactly.
and it's identified certain issues that,
Yes.
that should be or may be addressed, and I just
Yes.
think we wanna know fairly what
In
those
your
are.
scope, have they
Yeah.
addressed,
And
have
I don't-
and then like,
they addressed the key
treatment of each
risks
one, right?
outlined in?
Yeah, and whether or not, I mean,
Doing
some
this,
of
doing
them
that.
may not rise to the level of needing to be addressed, the way I'm
Correct.
looking at this, but I may be wrong, but I think we need to know what they are,
That's
Yeah.
good, that's good.
that's all I'm saying.
Okay. So what I will definitely do by the next meeting is talk to the architects and say, how would this be presented?
Right.
What
Well-
kind of information would it be, and how might we go about it?
Where would that information come from?
Yeah.
We're doing a document, or is there a I have no
Yeah.
idea, but I just wanna know.
I know there's a I know it's there, I just don't know how they
Okay.
would report it to you in that kind of concise format.
Okay.
Can everyone mark their calendars for Tuesday, June 25th?
And is there a September date now too?
Yes. Hold on, let me find it.
September.
Tuesday also?
Yes.
September
Oh,
24th.
numbers.
So last Tuesday?
September 24th, yeah. Is that what you have?
That's what I have.
Yeah, that's what I have.
September, October, November, December, is that the last meeting of the year? Or do we have one would we have one in December or January, November?
Oh, September, we did have one, we went to January, cause December
So
was hard
then maybe the last
to-
one, so
December
January
was
is the
hard.
last.
We did
Or
meet,
December.
but I think it's hard to get people to meet.
Maybe the same we have party, we get the.
Okay,
What party? You always have a party.
So, June 25th is the next meeting.
Yeah,
You want-
24th or 25th?
June 25th,
25th is Tuesday.
September
Check.
24th, that's the date that I.
September, that's the, September 24th. Seems,
Okay, and then we have an action item to fix that one first.
I
Yes.
propose we bind her, because they're just,
Whatever
you know.
whatever she has, I'm fine with it.
who's she,
Sarah, yeah.
whatever Sarah does.
Okay.
Can we ask her to do binders?
I'll talk to her about, cause yeah,
Sarah thinks about these a little differently than we think about
that's
them.
why, that's it.
Maybe she doesn't have to read them, because like,
No,
it's
she's,
upside down.
no, she's incredibly thoughtful about it, she has a very specific logic to
Very
it,
different.
She does?
but
I'd like to
but-
use a
I will
different, slightly
be-
different
but
language.
it's how somebody else sees it, and that's the part that I didn't offer to her this time. I take full responsibility for her, cause she's very thoughtful.
Okay, and the meeting's hereby adjourned, eight
Thank you.
Dennis.
Open IT work.
Get out of Dana's way. She's gonna be running towards the door.
I think Jeremy's gonna be with you.
Leave your folder by the door, okay, don't take it with you.
I'm not, I promise.
Go home.
I do, I have many things at home.
Is there a restroom?
Oh, this is
Yeah, like city meetings 24/7.
Did you guys have your IT outsourced to
Oh, sure.
No, we actually got rid of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't even know.
Oh, was it Tatash? My wife told me.
we got rid of HP for Tata, exactly.
Oh.
About 2 years ago. Sorry,
You talked to me about, you said, hey,
What?
You didn't go to the party.
What part?
You mean the parade? Oh,
What
man.
parade?
I was in
Oh, you
beautiful,
mean the parade? No,
I
I
was
didn't
in a
go to the parade.
beautiful
Oh,
black,
I love the parade. I was gone, but.
I was in a beautiful black convertible.
Oh,
You
nice.
were? That's what, you know
Oh,
what, I'm
dancing.
gonna tell you,
Cool.
when I retire, I told my husband, I was like, we're gonna go up and down in parades. I
Let me
love
tell you
parades.
something. Remember Judy
So
Crates?
funny.
Remember Judy Crates?
Uh-huh.
She was there with the
Yeah.
Castro group.
Yeah.
She walked up to me, she says, Juan, I'm retiring, I
She
promise you.
is.
I promise
Yeah,
you,
she
in June, in June I'll start your classes.
There you go.
Now, the vice
By the
chairman
way,
went into the back,
go
went into
Facebook.
the green room. Oh, okay.
Go Facebook, see all the pictures of the parade.
Okay.
Oh, you
All
took
right.
pictures of the
Awesome,
parade.
guys.
See you
Thanks,
later.
guys.
Yes,
Thanks,
go
great.
later.
Thank you.
They're all the parade, one around it.
Okay.
See you, thank you.
I'll wait for Jeremy to come out
señorita.
and say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually,
Oh, look, I still got my video
think
camera.
this is really interesting.
What part?